We left off today in class, most of us anyway. Some of us got a little bit further than this, which happens sometimes, but it's not a big deal. So if you've already heard some of this stuff, kind of zone it out a little bit, you'll be okay. But let's go ahead and get right into it so we can knock out the rest of the medieval Catholic Church. Now, I am going to show you the cool pictures I have from Austria and stuff like that tomorrow because I want to be able to further reinstate stuff, okay? So anyway, we talked about how in the medieval Catholic Church, saints were very, very important, and we talked in class today, too, about how the saints are very important to the Roman Catholic Church, where there is not as much of an emphasis on them in the Eastern Orthodox Church because of the great what? Come on now. Somebody say it. Come on. Good job, Anthony Rosano. Great schism, right? So anyway, by the way, I'm supposed to dedicate this flip to some of my past students, Aaron Wilson, Bryn Arberbacher, Breland Friedman, Olivia, and a couple other girls that come to see me every now and again, and Chris Hare, even though I never had him. All right, so anyway, now, so check this out, though. Let's keep going. The Village Church, right? So that's the title, and village life revolved completely around the church, right? Everything about your life during the Middle Ages revolved around your church, right? Because we talked about the feudal system, right? We talked about how there was the big triangle with the king up top and all the arrows and everything. Well, remember, the church superseded all of that, okay? Everything fell under the umbrella of the church because even a king wants to go to heaven. Now, anyway, so the village life revolved around the church. Your baptism marked your entry into the church. A lot of people call it a christening, I believe, these days. I'm not Catholic, so I'm just doing my best to teach you what I've learned from books. Marriages and funerals were held at the church, right? The marriage signified the holy union between a wife and a husband, and then also that marked further entrance into the church with their children and things like that. And your funeral marked your exit from the church, right? Held at the church, the dead were buried at the church, and this was the invention of the graveyard system, right? The cemeteries, hallowed ground, holy ground, where you should be buried, right? We don't just literally, like, if I died right now, you're not going to all stick me, well, I hope you're not all going to stick me out into the courtyard, because that's not hallowed ground, right? So, anyway, let's keep going, though. Now, this, of course, is a picture of a baptism or as a sacrament, okay? And we're going to talk about sacraments, and I'm sure you've learned a lot about them in Father Joe's class already. But this is, of course, a baptism. Good job, Fernando. Now, this right here, that baby looks petrified. But this is just kind of showing the lighter side of the entire sacrament thing. This is also another sacrament, right? So, the sacrament also of the tithe is what it was called. The church required a tax, right? It's called a tithe. That's 1/10 of your income, right? So, let's say hypothetically you're a lord, right? We talked about David, right? David's a lord in my second period. He is the lord of room 115, and the countryside is out in the hallway where all the barbarians and the football players are roaming around, right? So, anyway, David, every time he came into church, would have to pay a tithe every Sunday, right? And that's 1/10 of his income. Well, let's say David makes $1,000 a week. So he would have to pay $100 to the church. But then let's say we got a little serf running around, right? Like a little serf like Anthony Brown, right? So Anthony's a little serf. He's running around. He's doing everybody's bidding. Well, he only makes $10 a week, right? So he only has to give $1 in a tithe, right? So it's all percentage based on your income. Now, the funny thing is this actually carried over. It's how we do tax systems today in the federal government, right? Now, all of these things that we've been talking about, baptism, funeral, baptism, all of these things are sacraments, right? It's a sacred ritual of the church. If you want to know further sacraments and the entire list, like holy duties and like blessing the sick and things like that, Father Joe is a good person to go and talk about this with. But it's a sacred ritual of a church, and it's kind of like your ticket into heaven, right? So, that, of course, is a big sacrament. That is the Eucharist. Now, we will talk about the word transubstantiation when we get further into our stuff when we talk about the Reformation, right? Christians believe that participation in the sacraments would lead them to salvation. Salvation equals heaven, right? Union with the Holy Spirit. So, anyway, make sure you jot that down. It's kind of a given, though. Now, continuing forward, though. This next step up, we talked about the village church. Now we're talking about cathedrals, right? A cathedral is actually a huge church ran by bishops, supervised by the parish churches. They held services in grand style. Some of the cathedrals would hold up to like over 1,000 people. Very, very, very large services, okay? They were also built in the Gothic style. Now, when I say Gothic style, I mean a lot of different things. We're going to talk specifically, so leave some space underneath Gothic style, because we're going to talk about specifically about Gothic style a little bit more tomorrow, okay? So, anyway, now, and we're going to go ahead and skip through these, because I don't want y'all to see my pictures from my honey, man. Anyway, oh wait, we're going to skip that too. So, the church and women, right? Throughout history, we constantly in this class talk about political bodies and ancient societies' views towards other genders, right? Because we are not going to be Eurocentristic, and we are not going to be patriarchal in this pursuit either. So we have to look at how the church perceived women as the church believed that all people were equal under the eyes of God. Now, again, this has changed. This is the Middle Ages Catholic Church we're talking about, right? The modern day Catholic Church does believe this hardcore that all people are equal before the eyes of God. Women, men, everybody, right? However, the medieval Catholic Church believed that women were very weak and easily led to sin, right? So a lot of this also is going to generate some of our sexist ideals that also carried forward into society. And now again, this is not the modern Catholic Church's fault. This just kind of happened, okay? Now, they preach the ideal woman. Now, who in the Catholic faith is the ideal woman? And also, really quick, jumping back, somebody come in tomorrow for extra credit and tell me, why did they believe that women were weak and easily led to sin? Think about a Bible story. Come in first and tell me after the bell rings for homeroom. I'll give you extra credit, all right? Now, anyway, preach the ideal woman. Who's the ideal woman? Of course it's who? It's Mary, right? The ideal woman under the Catholic faith is good old Mary. So, we're going to keep rolling forward because that's kind of easy. Then we have these things, right? So, as you can see, we're actually moving up in our infrastructure of the Catholic Church, right? We started at the very, very lowest with our local priests, right? Our parish priests and our local parish churches, and then we went to cathedrals, right? Supervised by bishops, and then we were going to move up to monasteries and convents, right? And then we just keep going up and up and up. So, monasteries and convents. What are people called? Wait, hold on. Aha, I got to cover up that answer, right? What are people called that devote their entire life to their religion? Good job, Romanis. I heard Hannah and, heard Hannah and Abby say it at the same time. They're called monks and they're called nuns, right? Monks and nuns. Now, some people say, well, do we really have monks anymore? There are Catholic monks still. Most of them in Europe, though. Now, nuns, that's a heavy thing that you see a lot. We actually have a sister here at school. If you want to go talk to Sister Eileen Rush, she's down there, and she'll give you a whole insight into the system of monks and nuns and monasteries and convents, right? Now, a convent is for the nuns, whereas the monks are in the monasteries, right? There you go. So, anyway, they do a lot of things, though. They provide basic health care and education to the people that follow the faith. They provide places for travelers to sleep. And also, the main thing is, though, is that they were required to live by this set of Saint Benedictine, right? So, Saint Benedict created rules and regulations for monastic life, right? Really quick, as a side note, monasteries and convents, the most important thing about them is the fact that they provided an area for people to actually sit down and devote their lives to the Catholic Church, right? Everything they had, devoted it to the Catholic Church. So, excuse me. Now, St. Benedict created rules to regulate the monks and the nuns and their monastic life. It's called the Benedictine rule. How many rules do you think there are? I hear a lot of shouting. I hear a lot of responses. It's actually 3 of them, okay? So, the 3 rules are obedience to the church leader, which of course is our Pope, right? Well, not our Pope. I'm not Catholic, but my wife's Pope. There you go. And then the second one is poverty. Now, I don't mean poverty as they have to live a poor life. I mean that they are in pursuit of a higher order of things. They are not there to try and make money off of this system. They are there to try and impart the wisdom of God, right? And also their third belief is chastity, which is, of course, living a single status life so that you can devote your real life and your soul and your everything essence and not be distracted by another person to God, right? So, anyway, let's keep going. Also, this is really cool. Monks and convents actually house the very first libraries in Europe and universities, right? In Europe, and the first universities. So the convents and the monastery, the Catholic Church is kind of responsible in a lot of ways for a resurgence of intelligence during the Middle Ages, right? Because all of the intelligence held inside the Catholic Church. Now, it's not like libraries from Rome, because conquered people, that's the nuns having a good time, right? So Roman libraries were from conquered people where they kept all of their intelligence. Monasteries and convents are much more along the lines of educating the people that work through their system. Now, the cool thing about this, though, is actually the universities were taken from the Islamic peoples that were set up in Spain, because there was this giant convergence and this relearning of all the ancient texts, which we'll talk about further tomorrow. But I want you to really quick to write underneath this, the rediscovery of Aristotle. Underneath this, write rediscovery of Aristotle, and leave a couple of lines, and we'll talk about that. Somebody remind me, though, okay? So, there we go. Church power is going to grow substantially, though, right? Now, does anybody tell me, how does the church punish people if they step out of line? Huh? They're a church, right? So they're not trying to like immediately hurt anybody. But how would they actually keep order? The first tool is this. It's called excommunication, right? They kicked people out of the church, right? They cannot receive the sacraments or a Christian burial, so it was believed that their excommunication would lead to an eternity in you know where. All right, so anyway, so the excommunication is a very big problem because people, if you were excommunicated, you couldn't go to the village church. Remember, what did people view other people that didn't go to church as? Heathens, right? Heretics. So you didn't get to be a part of society anymore during the Middle Ages if you didn't be a part of the European Catholic Church. So this is a big punishment. You're very dependent on them in a lot of ways. Also, this is the other thing, right? So remember we talked about David in second period and how he's a lord of the land in 115? If he stepped out of line, everyone that worked on his fief could actually be excommunicated along with him. This was a punishment for powerful nobles. It's called an interdiction, right? It's an order excluding an entire town, region, or kingdom from receiving a sacrament or burial, which is eventually going to result in a lot of revolts. This is kind of how the popes began to pull this like power play thing a little bit, where they were trying to jab at kings a little bit to keep them in line. This is called papal supremacy. We'll talk about that later on. So remember an interdiction, okay? It's a very important word. The church believed, though, that it was the most powerful secular body, right? And secular means worldly, okay? Secular, for example, like this phone is secular because it is on this earth, right? I am secular. You are secular. The walls of this room are secular. Christ is not anymore, right? Heaven is not secular. God is not secular, okay? So secular is worldly. Now, the church also became more of a political unit as time went on. Popes eventually began to claim this thing called papal supremacy, which is power over kings and rulers because they believed that they were the ones that were imparting their ability to be able to move on towards heaven. So